Right, well, we'll get going. There will be a slow stream of people joining still, I suspect. But thank you all for coming anyway and tuning in on this very nice day. I hope everyone's doing well still, all things considered. For those of you that I haven't spoken with before, my name's Christy, and I'm a quality and test consultant for Xpertise Recruitment. And I place great testers with my great clients across Yorkshire and the Northwest. Today, as I'm sure you are aware, we are having a session delivered on performance testing by the wonderful people over at Spike95. And I'm sure Steve will introduce himself properly in a few moments and let you know exactly what him and the business are all about. Just a heads up that the session might overrun slightly today. I do usually say they'll last around the 30-minute mark, followed by questions. So if you do have to leave early, there will be a recording made available, within the next few days. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. As ever, feel free to ask any questions you have using the chat function on Zoom, just while they're fresh in your mind, and me and Steve will run through these at the end. Or alternatively, do feel free to speak up and, ask questions yourself at the end of the session. I love to see, the session spark discussion and knowledge sharing and people sharing experiences. So don't shy away from speaking up if you feel comfortable doing so as well. If I could ask everybody just to go on mute while Steve is talking, so there's no background noise or interference, that'd be great. And as ever, as I always say, if you're fully clothed and feel comfortable being on screen, I do like to see people's faces, as it does make the session seem a little bit more human and sociable. And I find often it can put the speakers at ease as well, as they can actually see their audience. So without further ado, I am going to pass over to Steve now. I hope you all really enjoy the session and take away some really useful info. So yeah, Steve, take it away.
Thank you. You've kind of built it all, like Christian. I've taken away lots of useful. We'll see how we get on. Honestly, as well, I'll try and get to the time slot. I know everyone would say a hot day, and people who want to be preferring their remote, maybe outside rather than sitting inside on a call. But I know I'll be doing the same. So, as we said as well, yeah, do jump in. Sometimes actually as a presenter you get sick under your own voice as well, so it's nice to get some other voices in to break it up. I also know as well, as I saw a thing from I think it was Andy Murray, who said, actually I get really excited, I just have a really boring voice. And I know that actually sometimes my voice kind of comes over a little bit of that, so please do chip in. It gives me a chance to take a drink, and hopefully it gets the discussion going as well, because it makes it a bit one-sided wise. Yeah, Spike95, so let's see if I can get my slides to work. There we go. So a bit about me. It's kind of hard when you start to look at your career and realize, God, I've been in IT for 25 years. So my history came through sort of the main years as a developer. I started as a developer, although interestingly, the first course I was ever taught as a developer when I joined British Airways was inting. So they taught us this before we were to develop. It was actually quite a nice perspective in all the stuff we've got there. I was pretty rubbish developer, I must admit. I did go through a phase of being a contractor, and I had a really, actually that says tested, but it was developed and tested an envelope packaging system for Guardian Royal Exchange. It gets better, fortunately. But then went on and actually kind of branched out developing, but also doing some test tools around year 2000. And actually fell into testing properly around just after year 2000 when I joined a company called Stir that later became SQS, now part of X Group, where I met Daryl, one of our colleagues runs our Manchester office, and got into performance testing, and then a lot of other stuff around training, and also did a lot of work with Mercury, HP around courses in load runner and training courses in performance testing as well. So that was really where I owned the whole thing, and then moved and joined Spike95. That's the very checkered history of the student years, the prem years, and the testing years. And then just quickly about what we do. So, at Spike95, where we have maybe 25 years of development and testing experience, but we really focus on performance and automation. So doing that really well. And it's all about, it's not just about running the test, actually about fitting into the right environment, making sure they're really delivering. At the end of the day, I'm going to talk about some of the challenges we've got at the minute, that having software that's reliable, that is scalable, and the customers really loves, the key thing that you want, that's what keeps them back. And also that's what keeps your costs down, keeps your revenue coming in, and ultimately keeps people like us in jobs, people like you in development and testing roles. And I think in performance, I'm going to talk about these terms as well. These are kind of the words we'll come back to: scalability, capacity, concurrency, and reliability. So I'll explain what they mean and how they kind of direct us as well. But they're kind of some 4 kind of key areas that we look at a lot in the performance world as well. So COVID-19 wouldn't be a presentation these days without mentioning COVID-19. And what we were looking at, we've like a lot of people, been hit in some way, but also used it as a bit of an opportunity to work out where we are and where we're going. We saw a lot that tech was really feeling the heat. Some major platform outages. I don't know if anyone's ever been sites like Down Detector and those sort of things, where we saw in the early days where Microsoft Teams and all of the sort of meeting platforms all had major outages as we all looked to remote working. Platforms that we thought previously pretty bullish started seeing some reliability, some scaling issues, either just through the sheer volume, but actually through new usage patterns. We adapted, we used systems differently, we transacted differently. So that's actually changed a lot of our previous approaches, previous workload models have all gone out the window potentially. And a lot of companies need to adapt. Some did it really well. Some of the free firms and the supermarkets kind of changed, brought new change through. How they actually deliver to the customer was changed very quickly. Some others actually had a pretty poor experience. An example, I think, was a long discussion I had on LinkedIn, people around being where they just slapped a very rudimentary system that had number 18,000 to do, and that was kind of all you got. So, that caused an issue. And I think that caused end user frustration. We're all seeing a lot of people talking about booking tests, doctors using Attend Anywhere. There's countless examples of that one. But it's a yin and yang situation, as the symbols there. And there's some really good stuff that potentially is coming out of that for all of us in tech as well, which is around the new opportunity. So remote working is now the norm. Actually, that gives us the ability to use technology to deliver testing more differently, which would be really good. A lot of focus is obviously on e-commerce and how we're doing. So, what's the toilet roll and hand sanitizer stage, and then everyone getting the gym equipment and those sort of some very marked phases that people went through. But now we're into kind of the recovery phase and looking at, well, what does this mean for low contact browsing? Is it buying something online and then actually going to get that shop experience, but balancing tech versus the sort of the clicks approach that way. Cash, are we ever going to use again? I can't remember the last time I actually used a 10 or a 20 pounds. So online banking, cardless payments, huge amounts change there. Cardless payments are absolute norm now. Will we ever go back into the bank branch? We're seeing a lot of moves in the digital side to actually get new services down to our mobile devices and everything else. And then loads of other stuff, even down to, the local pub we can't actually go to the bar. We're probably going to have to use sort of app, or maybe Deliveroo as example. Place a Deliveroo order for your food in a restaurant through all their technology, send it to the cloud, and then beam it to the kitchen about 10 yards away instead of passing it over the bar. So it's kind of a load of stuff about these models of how we're going to operate, which I think they're going to be really, really interesting. And actually, when Christy and I were talking earlier, I've thrown another point in there because we were talking about data and analytics. As we get these technical flowing and become more on them, or as we actually understand exactly what we're doing, then data and the analytics becomes really, really important. And that's potentially some new skills that people need to learn, might cause some new employment opportunities. And that list can go on and on. So I'll probably come out and onto that. So what it means as well is probably a little more of a strategic approach to testing it. So this was Monday's Dilbert, which kind of came out quite at the right time of doing this thing. How have you actually tested it? So if anyone's doing anecdotal tests, let's swap that in the questions at the end, because but I probably need to be a little more scientific. And what we're looking at and what we're having a lot of conversations with people about is actually just understanding where we are, a bit of a health check of that situation, how we're approaching things, what does it mean in the new world, and then kind of planning our next phase of recovery and our new technical approaches based on that. So what we tend to, and conversation was around, well, let's have a look at what we health check system for a client. Now, this isn't a sales pitch. I'm not trying to sell anybody a 10-day health check exercise unless you really, really want. The point here is actually, we follow a very a structured approach of doing what's an example there. I can make these slides available afterwards, by the way, for people who want to have a look through them. But this is kind of some of the steps that we look at of potentially up to 10 days of doing a really in-depth health check or something. But there's some really salient points that look at that keep up there that we thought would be interesting to pull out and just give ideas on things that you could look at and kind of do your own health check as well. So we picked out five slides, a few points on each, which will hopefully get us going, and then let's get into some discussion, and we can come back through these as we want. So first thing we always do, our step one there, we'll do a kickoff shop interviewing, and it's really about using our questioning skills as test to get a feel for where we are or where our client is, and actually where they want to go. And that really is talking to a lot of people. So quite often we'll talk about performance testing. We'll talk to the performance test team or the managers, but actually we really need to be looking more widely than that. Start picking up our picture, looking at our customer records, and I'll talk about some of the tools and the tech that can support us in that a bit later on as well. Always bringing in the operations guys. Those guys are always left out. It's amazing. I know we talk DevOps and hey, it's a smooth transition, isn't it? And it all just goes through. It doesn't happen in a lot of organizations. They're two very distinct groups. So bringing those guys in about what problems they're having, what challenges they're seeing, what are the things that they regularly have to do to keep our system or us alive is absolutely valuable. And then actually we're looking at the history. We're potentially looking at what's done, what change you put through, what new systems you've brought in, horror stories you've had, what successes. Let's not forget that actually some of the stuff we do is really, really good, and we should probably then pick out those pockets of success and take them forward. And then also we look at trying to understand the roadmap about what is it we're trying to do. A lot of people try and design their performance approach to be, hey, we want to do Facebook are doing. Well, you're nowhere near the size organization or scale of it. So, try and do right for you rather than what everybody else is necessarily doing. And then, as I said, we look at what's going on in development. I'm going to talk about that a bit more. Maybe you have a central team doing this, and we can talk about the pros and cons of that if you want to do that one. And then also kind of, it's amazing how much is done without the business's knowledge. So what you think you are doing and what you think you are trying to develop or put in place is not really what your key stakeholders doing. Agile is and modern working practices have changed that. We customer a bit closer to us, but not necessarily quite as close as they need to be. So that's kind of one of our steps, is really just understanding, if you like, we're on the map, are we, and where are we heading to? Which direction are we going in the right direction? Excuse me, take in between. So. Number two then, so our other thing that we would always have the discussion about is we find a lot of the time that people have done something in the performance area, or they've tried to do something, but they've hit a blocker. It could be for a valid reason, or it could just be something that we did something, but the person who's leading it actually left. So we'll try and understand these sort of things, and this may come out in our workshop, or it may be that we need to do some individual interviews to people, individual surveys. And we look at making this into some of the key areas. Start thinking about, is it that we don't have the knowledge to understand performance and work out what we need to do? It's a valid thing. Not everybody does. That's something that we can design some activities around. Do we not have the skills? actually people perceive they don't have the skills when actually you probably do. Maybe you just need some guidance and some things to push it over there to get things moving. And it's also interesting to work out whether what people perceive as their blocker are actually real blockers, because you can kind of very easily get things moving by just having that conversation. I'm going to come back to tools later on. We've got a whole separate section on tools, because that is probably where a lot of the performance discussion gets put. But again, it could well be limiting factors. What we'd also look at is, just because you've used a tool in the past and it didn't necessarily work, we wouldn't necessarily like talking about, again, it may well be actually some of the other factors around skills or knowledge or budget were the thing that stopped them being successful for you, rather than that itself. So let's not have some closed doors as we build this picture up. And then obviously we'd look at, a lot of people go, well, we haven't got time to fit performance testing in. As Daryl and I were talking earlier, well, it's amazing how we can't find the time to do the performance testing, yet we can find the time to have the outages or do those support activities. So let's try and flush some of this out and start the conversation going about what is that real-time blocker, and maybe can we get smart at building that into what we're doing. And if management buy-in, it may well be that some reasons why you're not given the budget is because you've got a layer of the organisation that actually isn't seeing the benefit. And maybe you've got a disconnect between actually the live production problems you're seeing and how that's trickling down. So that's another area then try to flush out to tackle. I thought I'd throw this one as well. Actually, when we do a survey, you'll notice we've got 4 points on each one rather than 5. Our experience of doing surveys and asking questions of people, if you give them 5 options, they will pick the one in the middle, and you get everybody sitting on the fence. So at least if we give them 4, then they're generally going to lean to the left or to the right. So it's quite a neat little tip, and to try and get a bit more people to actually make some decisions. And although it's dangerous, they sit between number 2 and number 3, of course. But at least you've moved it on a bit. It's just good as well, Christy, that I can't, if anyone does ask a question all the way through, I probably can't see it on the screen view I've got here. So by all means, if hands do come up, please, if you can chip in and do that, that'd be cool. Okay, so number 3 is thinking about how strategic you are about, we start performance testing, if you ask the word testing out. And again, when we sort of taught this performance testing, so it was adding value, but actually the discussion around performance needs to be much wider than performance testing. So sure, we do some performance testing activities, whether that's component level or large scale performance tests, and they're always going to be part of that. But actually the performance discussion really starts a lot earlier and a lot more widely. So we need to make sure we're talking about and thinking about performance, and that is part of the strategy rather than something tacked on at the end. And you'll find that it's all about functionality, it's all about something out there, and then work to the same thing and retrofit in performance. So ideally, we'd be starting much earlier and getting that through. One of the things that comes out of this as well is how well you define NFRs and workload models. So NFRs are just performance, of course. They may include accessibility, security, and a host of other areas. When I'm talking NFRs here, I'm talking about performance non-functional requirements. But we need to be thinking about, again, this is often seen as a testing activity, and it's the testers that get involved in driving a lot of the NFRs in some of the experience we've had. When you think, well, if we don't define what these wider requirements are for our system, how on earth can we give a developer or an architect a fair chance of actually designing the system and coding it to perform in the first place? So, we need to move that whole discussion. I'm hesitating on using the word shift left, but it's kind of moving that right back to some of the design phase. I'm going to talk about some of the critical areas as well, that a lot of activities do not need these large scale performance testing activities to really add value. So, moving that one there. I had a nightmare project with a major client in the last kind of about 6 months ago, where basically what we were doing was retrofitting a lot of requirements and sign off to go live that were written 3 years before and never given to the developers. The business had an expectation that their non-functional requirements were this, but it hadn't really trickled through. It hadn't been kept up to date. It hadn't moved as the system had moved on. And therefore, we were now having to sign something off that just didn't perform in the way. And actually, with them, months and months of dev time to move that one forward. The other thing about the NFR, it's really the sort of probably what we would call performance engineering, more performance testing, actually building performance in the first place. And then, what we think about this strategic approach as well is, I've put 4 buckets up or 4 categories, if you like, that we put into, because what this is doing is trying to help you understand where you may have problems. But what it also allows you to do is then, from your strategy, is to design right performance activities to fit in with those. So if we now go left, right, so scalability is kind of, you have problems where you've got long response times or higher resource usage. Quite often, these are fundamental problems that could have been found in the design stage. So not blaming the developers, but it's just the case of there are things we can do very early in the life cycle when we're writing the software. So very simple problems like single threading. If you haven't designed it and coded it in the first place to allow multiple operations to happen at once, then you're never going to get it scaling up later on. I mean, as much tin as you want out of it, it's not going to happen. It's kind of scalability, thinking about how we can do that. And then a link to that again is capacity, where we all about the cloud and how great the cloud is at allowing us to scale up and to support more user load. As your demand is in, then you would think that yes, you can add more load in there, but again, if you haven't solved some of those fundamental problems about physical limits with database and with networking and process, then you throwing more tin the environment isn't going to help you increase that capacity. So some very fundamental stuff there. On the other side, you've got concurrency, which concurrency is really about those sort of problems that you have that appear every so often, very hard to recreate. It could be something like a deadlock, where all of a sudden things the star line, if you like, in the wrong way, and 2 things come together and something goes bang. The solution quite often is to restart a box or remove a deadlock or restart a process, whatever that might be. So operationally, we get past the problem, but what you don't really do is fundamentally solve that problem in the first place. What you also risk potentially is if a process does fail like that, you have lost some money, you may have lost a customer order, a transaction. So it's probably got a really, really potentially catastrophic impact, depending on what that is. Now, again, fundamentally, it'll back to the developers, but actually recreating those apps needs outside of the developer. It's where you need your scale environments to try and create those simulations for those sort of less frequent but serious situations. And then finally, we've got reliability, which is kind of making it work for a long period of time and making it within our budget for an amount of time. So that's where we're in the realms of soak testing and long-term testing and those sort of things. And what I would generally do in terms of understanding this strategically is think about, actually, you could probably draw a line down the middle of these two. The couple on the left are really where we would, if we think we've got those sort of problems, then actually we need to focus our effort on testing, component level testing, code profiling, small scale things that are done very early life cycle, cheap to run, use open source tool, all that sort of stuff, and provide some real benefit. Finding those problems later on, you've missed them or they're expensive to fix, you've got to go through your entire test cycle. Whereas we've got more sort of currency and reliability problems, yes, there's a developer angle, but this is probably where we maybe need to think of larger scale performance tests, bigger environments, and we can kind of work out where do we need to focus our activities. Of course, it's a bit of a case in the bottleneck as well. We can left to right, potentially, but it's allowing you, if you understand these critical problem areas, it'll allow you to focus a lot more of your activities and move forward a bit more quickly. I think that then, so our other key sort of point and key working today is around question whether we're actually using our environments and our data as well as we probably could. The data's quite a potential. Talk about that. Whoops, sorry, my screen just went on. There we go, on my back. Sorry, my screen just locked. Test data is a very thorny subject. It's probably an entire subject in its own right. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the tooling on the next slide. But that in itself, and actually getting production level levels of data, reliable, realistic data that fully match what our customers are doing, is potentially a massive challenge. GDPR came in on top, of course, and the penalties, things we might, and where we just took a copy of push-in and kind of changed a few bits and pieces. It's legally not as something we can do now. But actually just changing that data means we'll probably change the nature of what we're testing. There's a lot of really tech out there that we might think about to help us get past some of those problems. The environment's also quite interesting because I think, again, acknowledging now, from when I started testing to what we can do, there's a lot of really clever stuff we can do that change the nature of the test environments we can do. So sure, we can use AWS or Azure or whatever cloud platform we're doing to provide us that hosted infrastructure to do that. But actually, we can then look at the deployment tools are much better now. We can get code live much more quickly, and also then replace that code more quickly. So we're seeing a lot of companies thinking about, actually, can we use product? And if not, what? Certainly, again, maybe in the e-commerce world more than the ERP or the sort of larger enterprise world, there's a lot of possibility where you can look at your hosting, you can use tools like Akamai, who are very, very clever. They've moved beyond image serve now, and they actually segregate and host whole areas of code that you can put into your production structure, without any customers being affected whatsoever. Data comes back through. There's some very clear, you can use the likes of Informatica and some of the other tools I'm going to talk about to segregate that data and make sure that it doesn't actually touch your production world. Now, it's not necessarily easy, and you do need an element of being brave, but you can be brave without being reckless and still achieve quite a lot. The alternative has always been that you scaled performance test environment, of course, and again, there are situations where we still have that. They're very useful for those targeted tests, but let's just think about the maintenance and the build overhead for doing that and make sure that when we use it, we are using it correctly and maintaining it. So you almost need that parallel universe, as many of you know. I think in terms of solving some of those things on the left, the area that is really interesting that we're seeing a lot of at the moment is about giving developers and developer squads their own environments. So, if you've architected your system to be almost kind of like an e-commerce example we were working with, where their browse, their search, their payments, all of those APIs, everything was kind of self-contained and very much split out. Each team could actually push the boundaries of their own code area and their neighbors without having to have a replica of the entire system. So we got a lot more there, and actually with environments costing us pennies a day rather than pounds, spin them up, put the code on there, test it, spin it down again, get the results, and move much more quickly than we could ever do. So quite a lot of stuff there. And again, the ability to refresh, we've got to make sure that actually we're keeping it in line. It's very easy for things to drift. So again, those deployment tools are much better at sorting it about resetting between tests and so on, and we can keep everything moving as well. And then our final one, so I'm conscious of time. I started at 5 past, didn't I? So if I can get in within the hour, is the tooling stack. So that, whenever we talk about performance testing, we always seem to come back to the tooling stack. And it's kind of, as I said, what we're trying to look at today, the performance discussion is much wider than the tools. Tools are very important, don't get me wrong, but they are just tools. It's a bit like building a building. Yes, you'll use a hammer and you'll use a screwdriver and everything else, but you won't build a building without a plan and without scaffolding and without the right skills and everything else. So, but there's a few things. Just, this is an example of some of the things you might need to think about in terms of how to get your architecture correct. It's not everything. We haven't put every provider on there because this slide would just be impossible. But we just sort of break it down into things you can do. Obviously, you've got your hosting, your AWS Azure that I mentioned, and then what this is running on. So whether it's an Oracle system, whether you're using, actually a lot of stuff we're seeing around Docker and Kubernetes containerization is really, really good, because that's also helping us to test and to spin up environments much more quickly. We've got, for me, the bottom layer is critical before I go to the tools themselves. So obviously you've got things like Elasticsearch, the Elk Stack, and Grafana, which are really, really good for data storage and analytics and working out what's going on, actually visualize the results. So we're seeing a lot more, actually a lot more requests to help to get that visualization going. But the stuff on the bottom left there, so New Relic, Datadog, Dynatrace, App Dynamics, so those sort of monitoring tools that we're using in production, we're seeing a lot more of those people trying to put those down into test environments to get the same visibility. Maybe not right down to the developer level, but certainly in their large scale environments is really, really good. So it's a great way for us to work out what is going on and to see how our simulations are doing. But actually, where I find it most of use for performance testing is that whole thing about the NFRs in the first place. Talking to operations, really understanding how your production system is behaving or misbehaving, using those tools that you have, and bringing that out and pushing that into your workload models and your simulations is absolute gold dust. If you can start to use what you've got in production and get access to it, because it was almost a shock when I did some performance testing of 10 years ago. They just wouldn't let us have this, which was crazy. It was kind of operational as well. Now we can get access to this and really then work out what's going on, target our developer activities, make better stations. So absolutely critical that we build up some skills around some of these tools, depending on what you're using, and start to use that information. And then I guess the final thing is, conscious of the time, but working out the thorny subject of how we actually create our simulations. So I talked about data tools. So there's a few, we've got GT Data Maker as it was, which then became CA Data Maker, which is now part of Broadcom. Informatica is a whole data analytics platform that allows us to create synthetic data, and that part of Curiosity, you've now out of, they effectively were the guys who were Grid Tools. So there's a lot of great stuff that they're doing well in terms of the data space. We've got everything we do around management and around storage and all that stuff on the right there. But the other tools that we always get stuck on are open source versus commercial, and what's out there. And pros and cons of each one. I think what we would encourage people to look at is, actually, if you're looking at more of the developer testing, then there's a huge amount you can get out of either just writing JMeter tests, which kind of becomes the de facto cert for a lot of stuff. But using Gatling, if you're in a CCD world, get more sort of strict performance tests, or actually Aurus, if you want to kind of get some of the graphical side of things going, as well as provide a bit of an easy orchestration on top of JMeter. That this tier well worth looking at. Your developers all over it. The other thing you can do, and we see those developer activities can then build up to the likes of the Micro Focus and Neotis, probably two biggest commercial tools. There are others, of course. Other tools are available, I should say. But we're also seeing now the blur of the edges, where the Microfocus world are now able to run JMeter and Gatling in the same thing. So you can start to kind of get things happening in development, build it all the way through, and then maybe if you're using some of those enterprise tools, you actually retain that value without having to sort of rewrite and keep the independence. The other to that as well is you've got. I was looking at Micro Focus Art this morning. There's also a new developer edition. They've actually renamed Load Runner Performance Center. It's kind of Load Runner Pro and Load Runner Enterprise, I think they're called now. But there's also a developer edition, which again is bringing that down to there as well. So there's a huge amount on that. Should we go open source? Should we go commercial? The answer is yes. How you decide that, yes, is kind of up to you. So we're big advocates of both. I think what you will find is if you look on any sites in any of the organizations, you will probably find an advocate who says, no, it has to be done in the load runner, or it has to be done in Neotis, or no, we're JMeter and we're never looking at anything else. For us, is kind of the wrong discussion, because it's really finding the right tool from your toolbox you bring it together to get that whole going. The other thing, as I said, as well as the Micro Focus and Neotis being able to run JMeter, for example, you can also then get scale around, say, BlazeMeter, which is built up of JMeter, which just gives you that short-term, fast execute of your JMeter test if you want to get some kind of some fast scalability and you haven't got the architecture to. So through a Pika in there, which is quite interesting. So I know they do a lot of technical in the media around Game of Thrones and those sort of big areas there. So there's some very specialist tools that come through there as well. And in terms of the 5 things, I am conscious of time. So I'm very conscious it's been moist and nobody says it all the way through. So I was going to kind of say, I've no idea. I picked this one to kind of go over to, and we go back to the Zoom window. And then when I actually looked again, apparently this Zoom picture here is actually an online thing that people are doing. So I'm not saying that he needs to sing a song, but wanted to open up discussion to people and see what anyone has to say.
Right, well, yeah, thanks for that, Steve. If anyone has any questions, feel free to shout them out, or write them in the Zoom chat function. I know I certainly picked up on something you said earlier, just about management buy-in, and I know, just speaking with testers a lot of the time, sometimes they do feel a little bit undervalued, maybe by organisations. What is the sort of obvious or the most common sort of pushback you get from management when it comes to performance testing, and maybe what are the key maybe case studies that you allude to as to why people should be doing it?
I think still see a lot of organizations, this is doom and gloom. I think have improved significantly, and people are getting it now. And certainly in some of the newer organizations who've kind of started with a new code base, started fresh, then a lot of the better performance tends to be baked in. Where we tend to see the old ways are in the legacy, and we've all done it this way. Certainly some of the bigger, we saw one of the big techs that we work with where we had to take them on a journey to actually understand really why improving this, pushing it further on, and getting it out of this center of X was really the right thing to do. So there is, I think, like everything we do in technology, there is always that legacy of old thinking that we've got to overcome.
Yeah.
The other one we probably see as well is cost. And this is certainly, we see it in the tool. It says, why should I spend X1,000 on it when I can get JMeter for free? Quite a tricky to go through. I would say there is just because it's free. Nothing against JMeter, it's a fabulous tool, and we use it significantly. We've done a lot of projects where we have moved clients across from one of the commercial tools onto that and got massive benefit. But equally, there are other situations where actually understanding benefit you get from a commercial tool and what you're doing and why is a really good to have, and can justify that. What we're very conscious of as well, the hard thing to do is to try and really prove the benefit you've had through any testing, not just performance testing. We did an exercise with one organization where what we could actually look at was, by looking at their customer profiling on their ordering system, the stats we were getting through their, I think it was AppDance they were using. And then we can actually measure that to the response times we were getting on the site. We could start to see some correlation between what was really happening in production and what that real customer might be. Extrapolate that to the average size of our basket, for example, to come up with some sort of financial figure versus what it would the drop off of that as performance got worse, and then you can kind of quantify that and go, well, actually spending X thousand on a tool and the time it takes and whatever else to potentially save us this money. So I think sometimes you need to kind of understand the language they're talking, what is really driving them, and try and push their button or pull their lever depending on which way it is, and actually find that thing that kind of they really care. That we also see that, well, let's just get it live and get time to it, and that's absolutely fine. What we've then got to do is have a discussion around, okay, we're live and we've got time to market, but we're now being hit by poor reliability and increased operations costs. So kind of trying to find that picture.
Yeah. Okay.
Find what buttons to press. I think that's the key thing with them. I don't know. I mean, has anyone else had any issues or success in, winning over a tricky manager, get the funding they wanted or the time to do things like this?
I know certainly in our one last week, which is all about test automation. It was all about like being an advocate for it and sort of winning over management in that respect, and almost coming up with your own case studies as the way you should be doing it, and why it adds so much value as well to the testing process. So yeah, I'm not sure if anyone has any experience of when they've done this before. Not necessarily just performance testing.
I think I come at it from a different angle, actually, as a customer of a software that has been provided by a third party. It was really interesting at the start of your presentation saying you've got to define in your requirements really clearly what you want out of the performance, because I know it's something we've missed, for example. And now, once you've got the software, it's kind of too late. As you were saying, it's a lot of things are already built in it. As far as we're concerned, for example, it's a software that is off the shelf, and then we've got some customization, etc. But some of the things we've already missed the trick from the start. And I think it's really interesting to point it out to people that you've got to remember to be clear with your requirements on this.
Yeah, but I think as well, absolutely you do. But also, kind of don't be hard on yourself for not having that in the first. It's never too to try and push that back in. So actually, just recognise it, make it, kind of surface that, get it out there, and then just go, well, okay, we probably didn't do that. We need to get better at it. What can we do about it? Try and find it. Try and advocate or a sponsor who will kind of. There will be somebody who's also having the same problem or the same concerns, and actually just getting out there, getting a discussion going really does kind of move things forward. And also as well, you don't solve every performance problem up front. You can pick these things off, you can kind of prioritize them and work out, well, actually, let's make this little bit better, or let's just get a pocket of success with one team on one platform. We did that with another organization where they had something like 30 different dev score platform teams, and they all did to do developer tests, but really there was no way that you could, if you tried to spread your time across every single one of them, we'd have got nowhere. So we just picked a small subset of them and made them the case study, improved the whole performance, including how they pushed it and developed, how they integrated performance files into some of their sprints, into some of the story code they put in there, and what worked for them, and some success, and then took that to the other teams. And that was a much faster way to do that, rather than to kind of boil the ocean at one go.
Okay. Has anyone got any further...
Everyone's very quiet today. Is everyone just too hot today? It's kind of I know I've got the fan blowing here, so I'm probably staying nice and cool, but
I am melting at the moment, actually.
You look like you are, actually. Appreciate everyone's probably got lunchtime to grab lunch before they get back to work, or things like that as well. So any questions?
Yeah, exactly. So if anyone does have any further questions, I mean, don't hesitate to reach out to me, or I'm sure Steve would be more than happy to answer anything as well. I mean, massive thank you for obviously Steve for giving the talk, for everyone attending, and giving up a lovely sunny lunchtime as well. really well done, and very informative for us all. For those of you that are around next week, we have a talk from Beth Marshall, who's quite a prominent figure in the UK testing community, and given a talk on a survey she actually recently ran and filled out by over 100 testers, which is all about how people have reacted to I suppose life after COVID-19 under lockdown, key challenges people have faced, and just generally how the community have come together to help each other with this. So that should be quite an interesting one. In the meantime, if anyone does have any, anyone needs any help with job applications, CV writing, or just sees a role that I'm maybe advertising that's of interest, don't hesitate to get in touch. I'd be more than happy to have a chat